Hey folks, Joe Valley here. Welcome to another episode of the Quiet Light Podcast. Today's podcast is sponsored by my Amazon guy. Stephen Pope is the founder of the company. I know him personally, as does the full host of today's podcast, Walker Dybel. If you've done any searching online on YouTube for educational content on how to grow your Amazon business, odds are you've seen Stephen's work. He does lots of free educational content production, and it's all over YouTube. It's everything he knows from running his agency, My Amazon Guy. If you need someone to level up your PPC, your SEO, your design, manage your entire Amazon catalog, check him out at myamazonguy.com. Okay, so on to today's podcast. Walker Dybel, the best-selling Wall Street Journal best-selling author, Walker Dybel. I always have to put that in front of his name now. I'm a best-selling author as well, but not on the Wall Street Journal best-selling list. So don't be impressed with me, be impressed with Walker. He interviews Brad Weimert today. Brad is the founder of Easy Pay Direct and has a great history of being an entrepreneur, which means that early on in life, he was a bit of a screw up and got into sales like many of us might have done, and then eventually became an entrepreneur based upon all the things he learned working at a company with about 30,000 salespeople, and Brad was at the top of the organization in terms of productivity and sales records and things of that nature. It talks all about his own personal journey, founding Easy Pay Direct, and how entrepreneurs can benefit from paying more attention to their costs when it comes to merchant services. Let's just jump right into it. We'll go with Walker Dybel interviewing Brad Weimert. Here we go.
Brad Weimert, it's Walker Dybel. So good to be here with you today. Welcome to the Quiet Light Podcast.
How many people call you Dybel?
Really? You're gonna kick it off with the mispronunciation? There's a couple of things. One, anyone who's on stage about to introduce me to the stage automatically will mispronounce it, and that's the only place that I can't actually correct them.
Right.
Weimert?
People go with Weimert all the time. That's why I'm so comfortable headlining with this.
Yeah. It's people say diesel and they know that it's the second vowel, but as soon as you switch the I and the E, everyone forgets that it's the second vowel you pronounce. So yeah. Brad,
I like it.
Brad Weimert, just for the record, we do something at Quiet Light where we essentially force our guests to actually introduce themselves. Would you kick it off with a brief or not so brief introduction of Brad Weimert and what you're all about?
Crazy. Sure. Very often, if I meet somebody really in any context and they say, "Oh, what do you do?" I say, I do a lot of running periodically, and I drink sometimes. I like adventures, and that's usually my answer. Because I think it's a stupid question. What do you do? And so when I meet somebody, frequently my question is, what do you spend time on? Because I actually want to know what they're investing time on in their life, how they've chosen to live their life. And I spend a lot of my time building Easy Pay Direct, which is a payment gateway and merchant account provider. I spend a fair amount of my time producing content for our audience, which are high 7, 8, 9, 10-figure entrepreneurs. I do that through the Beyond a Million podcast. And then I really like adventures. So I spend time going on adventures, and that comes in the form of, snowboarding, skydiving, endurance, athletic events, whatever is kind of a little different and unique that scares me.
Let's circle back to some of that later. But what I want to do, Brad, is sort of get your story, right? So in other words, let's start right with the most important thing. How do your parents feel about your mohawk?
Hate it. Neither of them like it. Both of them are upset that I have it.
Were you live in Austin right now? Were you born in Texas?
No, I was born in Ann Arbor, Michigan.
Yeah. Okay. Now, okay. So I'm actually reminded of something. A good friend of mine here in St. Louis, John Rulin, Giftology. A good friend of ours, Justin Donald, author of Lifestyle Investor. I was listening to your podcast, Beyond a Million, and you were interviewing Justin Donald, and I found out at that moment that you were part of this like Costco group. Okay. And like, there's so many people from there, meaning you three, that I know that have sort of like, reached like these, legendary proportions as like an entrepreneur. So let's go all the way back to Costco. How?
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I feel obligated at this moment to correct the host and say Cutco, because that's what you mean.
Thank you. Cutco. Thank you. And so with Cutco, tell me about how you like, why was this attractive? What was your motivation? How did you get started? And what was it that you learned during that time?
I was a full-blown delinquent as a child, and I probably got arrested 11 times before I was 20.
Is that right? Okay.
Yes, very much. And I smoked a lot of weed before it was legal, and got reprimanded repeatedly for it. And I got a, yeah, exactly. So I was an entrepreneur, exactly. Before it was acceptable, apparently. Do you think that's why weed's legal now? Because all the entrepreneurs were like, "Hey, fuck you. We need to be able to smoke weed."
Yeah. We need to get our executives out of jail.
Yeah,
for the economy. The national debt kind of depends on it.
Yeah, I like this. This hypothesis. So I got a letter in the mail, and the letter in the mail said, "Sell sporting goods, make twice what minimum wage was at the time per hour." And it actually said per hourly appointment, which was a sneaky twist of language. But functionally selling Cutco it's not quite door to door, but pretty much it's in-home sales where you sit at somebody's kitchen counter and try to sell them knives. And it is Vector Marketing is the name of the marketing arm and the company that you work for. Cutco is the name of the product. It's been around since 1949. It's a phenomenal product. It is very, very well made. It's guaranteed forever. It's all made in the US, or most of it these days. And it is a really, really, really good training program for sales. And so I got into it kind of by happenstance and ended up doing very well. I was the number one rep in the company at one point. And I met Justin Donald, John Rulin. The other you might know is Hal Elrod. So Hal was also a Cutco child. John Vroman, John Berghoff. These are all people that I grew up with in the Cutco environment.
Wow.
Yeah. And it's Pete Vargas was kind of not my era, but also from Cutco.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's a breeding ground for great entrepreneurs, because they teach the skill sets that drive all business. It's accountability, it's organization, it's personal development, and it's sales. And man, I got so many lessons from being thrown to the wolves, cold calling. So it was a great part of life, and I'm very grateful for that company.
But did you sign up? Like, how old were you when you signed up for this?
18.
Okay. So I saw you went to the University of Michigan. Isn't that right?
It's true. Go
okay.
blue.
So were you doing it at the same time? Going to
yes.
And selling Cutco? Okay.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I was making $100,000 a year as a 20-year-old selling knives. And so it did beg the question, why am I going to school?
Yeah. Right.
For sure. But it was also, this is 2000. So different era relative to whether or not it was acceptable to just skip school. I think today it's pretty clear that you can get this information anywhere. And it's so easily accessible. At the time, it wasn't. It was sort of pre-real internet. And it was what you did. So yeah, I was selling while I was going to school, but I was really dragging my feet on the school thing, and really enamored with beating everybody and making money.
Okay, so you were ambitious, you were competitive, and you were making $100,000 a year by running as fast as you could. So that's why you did it.
Yep, that's about it.
Awesome, that's good. So that was 2000. I want to kind of when did you stop selling Cutco knives?
Yeah, 2006.
Great. What happened in 2006?
In 2006, what happened in 2005 was I realized that at the end of every year, the clock started over with Cutco. And we had these annual competitions. And so the end of 4, going into 2005, I was at 0 again. And I thought, shit, this sucks. And what am I going to sell knives forever? I need to do something else. And so I started to also, I had school sort of looming over me. And I thought I got to finish school and get this off my plate so I can move to the next chapter. And I got to figure out what I'm going to do next. So for the next 18 months, I took like 18 to 20 credit hours a semester, loaded it up, and thought I'm going to sell Cutco, but only for money. I won't pay attention to the leaderboard. I won't go to their events, conferences, meetings. I'm just going to sell for money and knock out school. And while I do that, I'm going to build a list of criteria of what I want next in my life. And I built this list of things like no cap on income, location independent, recession resistant, tech focused, B2B, which ended up being probably the most important one, and the ability to make a lot of money fast. Ultimately, I met somebody in credit card processing actually through Pete Vargas. And that list was accomplished by credit card processing, except for the ability to make a lot of money fast. It is a very slow build. So I did a bunch of real estate investing to accomplish that particular goal. But that B2B element turns out being probably the best decision that 25-year-old Brad made. And it's much more, it's much more clear to me now, but the reason that was important to me was when I was sort of nearing the end of Cutco, I had sold to 2,000 people, but I had 2,000 Mrs. Jones on my list. And I thought, well, what am I going to do with 2,000 Mrs. Jones? And ruling out being a gigolo as a life proposition moving forward, there wasn't a whole lot that I was going to do with that list.
You could make a lot of money fast, but you'd probably start the year at zero again.
Well said. Well said. So, what was clear to me at 25, actually, and I think part of this was John Rulin. So I knew John, and John had started selling Cutco to companies. And he had built this corporate gift program, which ultimately was the foundation of giftology. But I remember having conversations with him, and he was spending time hanging out with Mr. Jones and grabbing drinks with Mr. Jones and meeting Mr. Jones' other business friends. And then he had this network. He had these people that he could call. And I thought, you know what? I need to deliberately design that in the next thing so that whatever I do when I'm in this position, which was the end of Cutco, the end of a chapter, I have that network. And that, today, I believe that relationships are the most important part of life. I think that they fuel everything else in life, your business, your personal, everything you do. But that was the starting point. That was a wise for his time, 25-year-old Brad, guiding the rest of current Brad's life.
And so in 2006, you made the decision to.
So 2006, as I looked for things to do, I got introduced to this guy in Phoenix who owned a credit card processing company, introduced through Pete Vargas, and I signed on as a 1099 agent to sell credit card processing. Did not have any idea what I was doing at all. Did a relatively terrible job doing it for the first 2-3 years, largely because Cutco is a B2C. You're selling kitchen knives. So business to consumer, tangible sale, short sales cycle. Those three elements in sales, tangible, intangible, B2B versus B2C, and the length of the sales cycle, those things have a radical amount to do with the salesperson and the type of sale you're doing. So they don't translate necessarily. So when I move from that into a longer cycle, B2B intangible, you're selling something in a completely different way. And I was not very good at it.
Well, but like credit card processing, I mean, if I'm buying it, what am I looking at? I want to know how much you're going to charge me, right?
Yeah.
I mean, wasn't that kind of the end and the beginning? Like, I would think it would be a pretty fast closing rate if you can undercut the price and move on, right? Or no?
Well, two things. In brick and mortar, you really are looking at that. In brick and mortar, it's very much a commodity, and so you're fighting to differentiate.
Yeah.
When you get into e-commerce, which we can talk about in a bit here, but when you get into e-commerce, rates are not the thing you should be looking at. It's kind of the last thing you should look at. But in brick and mortar, it is the thing. And so that's part of the challenge is like, how do you sell that person? And unfortunately, also, business owners have no idea what they're actually paying or what their actual rate is.
That's right.
It's a super shady industry. And more often than not, like I'm talking 99.99% of the time, people think they're paying a certain rate and they've just never, they don't even know how to do the real math to figure out what they're paying.
So you don't know this. I'm the person whose office is directly above mine is Jim McKelvey, the co-founder of Square.
Oh,
and
really?
So, yeah. And so he basically created Square, all trying to solve the problem around what you were just talking about, right? It's just basically like, first of all, how do we empower people that, don't have access to getting credit cards? And why on earth can I not use my supercomputer in my hand, my phone, to run a credit card, right? And try to bring some kind of stability to this. But so in 2006, when you were doing credit card processing, were you selling to e-com?
No. Well, so in 2006, I grew up in Cutco. All I knew how to do was randomly solicit people and try to sell them shit.
Yeah, right. And it was working.
It was working for me then. And I didn't even have the business acumen to know other approaches, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, that's what you did.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I tried to do. And it took me probably 3 years to get to a point where I had a $10,000 a month residual from doing it.
Yep.
And which was like enough to live off of and have a little money to not feel like I was starving to death. Mm-hmm. And also start to think about like building my own brand. But what happened through that process was I had friends that were launching e-commerce companies.
Okay.
In 2006, 2007. And the shop that I was selling for in Phoenix was declining all of these accounts. So I would have a friend that would want an account and they would decline it. And I'd be like, I don't get it. Why are you declining it? And so then I contracted with another credit card processor and then they would decline it. And over time, I started to learn about risk in payments and why these companies were declining accounts and what the challenge was with e-commerce payments. But that took me a lot of, trips to the concrete with my face to figure out.
Well, let's drill into this, right? Because this is ultimately, spoiler alert, this is what ultimately led to you founding Easy Pay Direct, right?
This is true.
So what were the challenges? How does this work? Like, show us behind the curtain.
Yeah.
What are the things that we should be paying attention to and all these?
Yeah, I will. And I'll tell you, before I do, the next chapter of my life, while that was happening, is somebody got introduced to me who ended up being a client, but he was selling real estate education products. So he was teaching people how to invest in real estate and he needed somebody to run the company. So I stepped in for 2 years in 10 and 11 and ran a company selling education for real estate investors.
Awesome.
Yeah. And so we had we were driving all the traffic online. We had a recurring membership. We were selling these, $20, $30, $50,000 coaching packages. We had all these.
Is it anyone that's still currently doing that you would recommend their program, or?
I will definitely not recommend a program. We definitely.
Let's leave it alone. Let's leave it alone. I don't have karma out there. We'll just move on.
Yep. Had a parting of ways for good reasons, but I learned a lot about that space, and that gave me an opportunity to operate in a model that has tons of challenges with payments. So I have both a lot of experience as a business operator there, and on the other side of the coin. So it's a pretty cool perspective to have, be able to see both things. But here's the issue. As a consumer, there are probably three really cool things about credit cards. One is you can buy shit and not pay for it right away. A lot of consumers like that. The other that don't want egregious interest rates, the cool thing is that you can buy shit and then you get a bunch of points. That's really cool. Free stuff.
Yeah.
But the third that is cool for everybody is that you can buy something, and if it's not exactly what you want, you can dispute the charge.
That's right.
And consumers have 6 months to dispute charges on basically all purchases.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the thing. When you dispute a charge, the first thing that happens is the money gets ripped out of the business owner's bank account. And then the business owner has to fight to get that money back. And they might win, they might lose.
They always lose. in my case.
They always lose.
I lose every single time on my e-commerce account. I'll send them something that, and like the bank wants to side with their customer, not me.
Yeah, it's super irritating.
Yeah,
super irritating.
Am I unique in this fashion? Like I now like ignore them. I'm like, oh, okay, here's another time waster in my inbox.
Yeah, totally
like
get it.
Literal mailbox. They mail it to you, right? But go ahead.
That's a whole nother issue. But yeah, so here's the big problem. The big problem is that if the business doesn't exist anymore, the credit card processor has to pay it back. So, and if you think about this, like how many businesses go out of business at some point?
A lot.
Yeah, like all of them, right? Like almost all of them will be gone in your life cycle, right?
Okay.
So credit card processors have businesses close every day, every month, all the time, and then they lose money for all the refunds and chargebacks that come through after the business is gone. So they're thinking their risk of that happening is the likelihood of chargebacks happening with the business combined with the likelihood of that business going under.
Yeah.
So all credit card processors have this exposure. And so there are two ways that credit card processors want to control for this. One is they do really thorough underwriting on the front end. They get to know who you are, what you do, how you operate, because it helps them understand the likelihood of that happening later. And they'll just decline your account if they don't like the likelihood of it happening, right?
Mm-hmm.
The other way that they do it is they'll approve your account immediately, like Stripe or PayPal or Square, with no risk assessment, but then they don't know who you are or what you do or how you operate. So the only way they can control risk is by holding your money or closing your account.
Mm-hmm.
So if you Google, Stripe held my money, you will get tens of millions of hits of people that have had this issue. And it's not good or bad. It's just how the business model works.
And what's it called when they hold your money? There's got to be
a reserve.
A reserve. Okay. And then do they keep a reserve how is that calculated? Is it a percentage? Is it a lag? I mean, what's going on?
Yeah. The most common structure, it could be structured a bunch of ways if you were working with a creative credit card processor or bank, which is very uncommon. Mm-hmm. But usually the common terms are they will keep 10% of your money for 6 months on a rolling basis. So like, let's say you process $100,000 in January, and then February, March, April, May, June, that 100,000, they would keep 10,000 in January, and they would release that 10,000 in July.
My God. So for business, keep doing it over time. Cash flow is not important. Go ahead and sign up with whoever.
Well, and here's the big problem. Stripe in particular, they are getting ready to go public as of, it's November 14th, 2022. Every time, and this isn't unique to Stripe, every time a payment provider goes public, they clean the risk off their books. And so you'll see an excessive amount of accounts getting closed or reserves getting imposed to make it cleaner for the acquiring party or the public in this case.
Okay. That literally just happened in one of my businesses. I feel like 2-3 months ago, like all of a sudden their rates went up and like my reserve got, that makes perfect sense. Cause it was like, why are they doing this? They're shooting themselves in the foot. Now I get it.
Yep. Wow. IPO, super normal. Okay. And we see it happen all the time. Like every large IPO, it's the writing's on the wall for it. We know it's going to happen. In Stripe in particular, you'll see higher reserves. So 10% is sort of the normal reserve in our industry. Sometimes we'll see 5. With Stripe, we end up seeing like 20.
Yeah.
And cash flow, if you're holding 20% without notice, it presents problems sometimes.
So okay, Brad, here's the thing. This particular company of mine that I was referring to is called the Acquisition Lab, right? We do education and coaching for entrepreneurs who want to learn how to buy a business. Okay. Mm-hmm. We are we're currently set up as it's a sign up fee, and then we work with you for a year or more. Okay. Yeah. You pay on the first day. Okay. Yeah. So you might know where I'm going with this, which is, if you've got, say, a coaching business or an educational business where someone is charging for a service to be provided over a certain amount of time. Okay. I have staff. Okay. Truth is, I actually subsidize the training it's true, right? Tucker Max told me once, first thing you want is customers. The second thing you want is forgiving customers. The third thing you want is profitable customers. We now have results and we're going to work towards profit. But the point is that I can make that sale. I can provide all of my team's coaching and time and training and everything for this person. And then 5 months later, what you're saying is, because I'm currently using Stripe, they could then go back and get essentially, what's it called? Debate the charge and get the funds back. And then I would be out that money. Isn't that true?
Dispute. Yeah, 100%. And but that's true no matter what credit card processor you use. Like, so those are the terms and conditions of using Visa, MasterCard, Amex, Discover, is that the consumer has the ability to do that.
Okay. So when you said that what we should be paying attention to, okay, as online business owners, is not the rate in which we're paying. Is this where you were going? It's sort of like, what's the reserve? What's the
likelihood of you having an issue?
Yeah.
Right. And so look, if you're in the first step is what's the likelihood of chargebacks? If you have chargebacks in your business and it's a part of the business model, for damn sure, you need to be working with a company that actually understands your business model and does this. Now, if you have chargebacks, you're probably already aware of that. The bigger liability are the businesses that don't have chargebacks. And so they think that they don't have any issue with this. And they're like, no, we're super clean. We never have any problems. We're not high risk. We barely get refunds. The problem is if you're in an industry that has these issues, I mean, do you think that Stripe is making decisions based on each independent account or the category of business that you're in?
Yeah. I mean, they don't look at it one at a time.
No, it's millions and millions of businesses. It's certainly the latter, right? So in the larger the processor is, the more likely that is to happen. But specifically with this aggregation model, which we call a payment facilitation model for Stripe, PayPal, et cetera, it's more likely to have that happen. So the big liability is when you think everything's fine because you're like, I don't have any chargebacks, my customers love me, et cetera. But you're living in an ecosystem, either an industry or a marketing model where there are problems, right? Or a regulatory issue, like you sell CBD or guns or something like that. But but the big challenge is that business owners don't know what constitutes risk, right? And why would they, right? Like they're not. You shouldn't have to be an expert in credit card processing if you're a business owner.
That's right. In fact, I've never been so invigorated about payment processing until this call right now. So, but seriously, so you start about 2012. You started Easy Pay Direct, obviously with some of these solutions in mind.
Yeah.
Is that right? Like, how does Easy Pay Direct actually solve for these issues?
Yeah, well, there are a couple things. So there are big levers in different areas, and there are other problems that people run into outside of risk as well. Like, how can you get the most transactions possible approved? And your decline rate is actually controllable. So there are voluntary declines that do not need to be declined, but somewhere in the ecosystem, somebody is assessing it and thinking it's fraud and not letting the transaction go through. So there are ways to optimize for that also. But fundamentally, there are two big things. So one is Easy Pay Direct is a payment gateway that allows you to have multiple merchant accounts in it and then automatically divide the volume across them. So if you have a problem with one of your merchant accounts, you have more than one and the other one's still up and running. And we call that transaction routing. Now, I'll tell you that it's super, super commonplace to do this. There's also a really bad way to do it and a really good way. So you want to make sure that you're doing it in an above board fashion if you do it. So number two for us is that we are connected to probably, call it 35 different banking partners on the back end. All of our banking partners are aware of this structure, and all of our banking partners are good at different things. So we want to make sure that if Walker is selling information and he's got a coaching product or package, that he's working with one of our banks that actually likes and understands that business model. Right. And that's really important. So it's working with the right providers and then having redundancy, having more than one provider there. And that's kind of the cornerstone of being able to do that. And then with us, with Easy Pay Direct, you have a single point of contact that just does it all for you to keep it from being complex.
And just curiously on business model as an entrepreneur, I'm just curious, like, what infrastructure does Easy Pay Direct have? Like, it doesn't sound like you're a brokerage. Like, you're not a broker connecting, say, entrepreneur X to bank Y. Right.
Yeah.
Or, there's something else there. What infrastructure that Easy Pay Direct has other than obviously knowledge and everything, but.
Yep. So, it's software is the short answer to that. So, we've got a 6-person full-time development team in-house, and we're looking at how we can assess and manage that risk and that proposition on the front end and as time goes on.
Yeah. Okay. And you're what, 11 years into this? Wow.
Yeah, it's been a little while.
Yeah. So that's awesome. So okay. Okay. I forgot my question. I guess it would be like like okay, so who is your target customer, right? There's thousands of people listening to this podcast. I just want to know, like, if you could reach out and say, like, this is the person, what does that person look like? Is it, X million in revenue? Is it, all those?
Yeah. If your business is under $500,000 a year, you're flying under the radar more than likely. So if you're under $500,000 a year, you can get away with pretty much any payment option, unless you are squarely in the high risk thing. Like if you're selling $50,000 coaching packages or $10,000 coaching packages, if you're selling high ticket, you need to be paying attention no matter what. So like the $2,000, $5,000, $10,000 transactions, you always want to know who your payment provider is. But other than that, we want to work with people that are $500,000 and up in revenue. Yep. Because they've hit the radar. Like they're going to hit the risk flags with Stripe or with PayPal or with another provider.
Okay.
So our two qualifiers really, generally speaking, are over $500,000 a year. And generally speaking, the card is not present during the transaction.
Okay. So online transaction.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So you started a podcast called Beyond a Million.
I did.
Why? What is the premise? Why is it called Beyond a Million?
Yeah, well, because really our target market are people that are beyond $1 million. And the $500,000 is really just putting it on people's radar to say you should be paying attention. Because look, if you're at $500,000, I'm optimistic that you're going to get to $1 million. Yes. If you're under $500,000, you might also close the business and you might never get there. I don't know.
Is this, hold on a second. Let's go back. So this is for e-commerce. This is for info products. This is for, any of these types of online businesses, right? But all the way back at the beginning of your story, you said your friends that were starting e-commerce businesses were being rejected. And I wanted to know why and how Easy Pay Direct addresses that component.
They were being rejected because of the perceived risk. And so some of them were selling information. Some were just selling widgets on the internet, but it's all the same. And so the question is, where is the risk? Which is, what's the likelihood of chargeback? What's the likelihood of the business going under?
Yeah.
And are they in a category that does that? But it's crazy how many categories there are that are risky. Yep. So airlines are one of the riskiest propositions, period. Well, why? And most people can't answer that question, as they shouldn't be able to, because it's a geeky payment question. But the answer is, quote unquote, acts of God. So if I have a meeting and I need to get to the meeting and I give you $500 for a flight and then the flight gets canceled, well, I want my $500 back. Well, the airline's that says, I don't know, sorry, we can't give it back, right? We'll just rebook you another time. And you're like, well, that doesn't accomplish my goal. So weather, i.e. acts of God in this situation, are a huge driver for disputes. So there are tons of industries like this where there's something that happens that creates the risk of chargeback that consumers and business owners don't think about, but the payments ecosystem is very clear on, right?
Yep.
So how we address the risk is working with a bank that wants that risk, right? Okay. So kind of back to this network of 35 banks we have, and I'll get to Beyond a Million, but you as somebody that's assessing businesses, right? You're helping acquire businesses or helping other people acquire businesses. If you don't understand a business model, is it wise for you to invest in it?
Definitely not.
Right. There's perceived risk.
Yeah.
Because, right. If you thoroughly understand a business model, you're able to mitigate the risk.
That's right.
Right.
Completely.
Same thing is true of payment providers. So if a bank says, hey, we know how this info product model works, where it's like you're going to sell some little item and then you're going to get into a subscription and then you're going to do a coaching package or do a live event, they get the escalation. And as a result, they know what flags constitute real risk.
Yeah.
Right.
Got it.
Whereas somebody that doesn't get that model is going to look at like a large transaction go through or a spike in volume and think, uh-oh, this is a problem. Well, that would be a problem if it was a coffee shop, but it's not a problem for an info product company.
So in Beyond a Million, when you open every episode, you say something along the lines of what got you here isn't going to get you there. Right. And so, it's almost like the next step. Hypothetically, if there was a podcast called like, My First Million, for example, once you get it, you would then go to Beyond a Million, right? Like how do I go beyond? Right. And when I was researching you before this call, Brad, which was great to sort of formalize my research around you. One of the keywords that came up was Brad Weimert net worth.
Oh, funny.
Do you want to share with us what your net worth is?
No, but
do you share what your revenue is?
Yeah, I don't do that either. But there's a reason that I don't do both, and that is that I look at other people's numbers all day, right? Yeah. So we look at everybody's numbers. Obviously, I can't share that with anybody,
right?
But I don't want I don't want to give people a reason to cast judgment in either direction.
Yeah.
And at all levels, somebody will think you're small and somebody will think you're big.
That's right.
And it is truly up to that other party. And if you omit that from the conversation, they have to make the assessment based on something else.
Mm-hmm.
And I would rather them make the assessment based on their feelings around competence.
Yes. Right. Okay. Now, I didn't think you were going to answer the question, but but back to Beyond a Million. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, there's a bigger conversation there around that, but that's the nutshell. And back to Beyond a Million. Fundamentally, the reason the show exists is because we want to be able to produce information for people around sales, marketing, operations, technology, and taxation.
Yeah.
That is effective for 8, 9, 10-figure companies.
Yeah.
And this idea of what got you here won't get you there is that when you're going from 0 to 1 and kind of trying to prove concept, you do things differently. You don't need a concrete system. You don't need a bulletproof marketing plan. You don't need an SOP directory that teaches you how to do the nuances of HR.
Mm-hmm.
But you might need those things at 10 million or 50 million or 150. And even 10 versus 150, they're probably going to look different. And so I wanted a scaffolding to be able to extract that from entrepreneurs that had done it and could talk about, hey, this is what the next chapter is like. And this is how things probably need to change.
It's a great podcast. I mean, it's really
Thank you.
Exceptional. Yeah. You climbed Mount Everest twice. Just kidding. You climbed twice the height of Mount Everest, okay, which totaled 58,000 feet over a 34-hour period. Okay. What the hell's going on here? What was it? What was this thing?
Yeah. So
I'm bring this up because I know you're like an athletic junkie. And so this was going to point to. Yeah. Like on here.
So there's a fun little video at everestingx2.com. But the consolidated version of this is that Jesse Itzler, who was the founder of Marquis Jets, he's one of the owners of the Atlanta Hawks. He's married to Sarah Blakely, the founder of Spanx.
Oh yeah. I know this guy. Great.
Yeah.
I love his story. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. He's a great, unique, unusual human.
He only eats fruit before noon.
He only eats fruit before noon. This is true also. Yeah, it's true also. So he wrote a book called Living with a Seal. Mm-hmm. Turns out the seal is David Goggins. And that was kind of the beginning of David Goggins having his own brand. Yep. But Jesse started an event called Everesting, where he rented a mountain and challenged people to climb the mountain, the height equivalent of Mount Everest. And I hear him, he speaks at a CEO group I was a part of called War Room. And I hear him talking about it. And I think, shit, I have to do that. And I think I had a visceral reaction when I heard it. And I had been drinking tequila in the back of the room. I'm sure I said something loud and people stared at me. Mm-hmm. So I submitted a little form on their website, and a couple months pass. And then I get I had a scheduled call with his business partner, Mark. And I was at another event in Colorado. I was in Denver at the Four Seasons sitting at the bar and talking to Mark, and I'd had a few Manhattans. And I said, okay, so how's this thing work? And he said, well, you have to climb it 17 times. And I said, okay, how long does it take to get up the mountain once? And he said, well, we think it takes about an hour. And I said, you think it takes about an hour? And he said, yeah, well, I've done it once and Jesse's done it twice. And I said, hold on. You've only climbed this thing 3 times and you're putting on an event where you're telling 100 people that they have to climb it 17 times in a row.
Whoa.
And he said, yeah. Okay. That's ambitious. And okay. And I said, well, how long are you giving people to do these 17 laps? And he said, well, we're thinking 36 hours. And I said, 36 hours? And he said, do you think that's not long enough? And my drunk ass, I said, motherfucker, I could do that shit twice in 36 hours. And as soon as I said it, I thought that was a bad idea. And he said, oh, yeah. And I said, well, I've had a few Manhattans. Maybe we talk about it in the morning. And Mark said, yeah, or you could step the fuck up and get your foot out of your mouth. I was like, oh, shit. So I stopped drinking the next day. The event was 7 weeks away. And frame of reference, I'm getting ready to do a 34 hour straight endurance event. This is what I'm aspiring to do. Most Ironman races, they actually cut off Ironman races at 16 hours. And most people take, 12. It would probably take me 10 to 12 hours to do an Ironman. And I'm about to do something for 34 hours. Most Ironman races, people train for like 9 months. That's the standard Ironman training regimen. I have 7 weeks to do this. So I go into overdrive to train. And I mean, I'm doing there's a 60-story building in Austin that I'm climbing the stairs on with a weighted vest and a oxygen deprivation mask on. I mean, I'm figuring out how to train for this 34-hour thing. And I go do it and I get about 22 hours into it. And just fucking hit a wall like hard. 22 hours in, each lap had taken me about an hour. And at 22 hours, I'm like delirious.
Eating?
You have to, right?
Like goo every, 15 minutes or something for a day.
Yeah. So there are 3 parts of endurance races that you have to focus on. One is your physical training, right? Have you trained enough to do this thing? 2 is your mindset. Do you have your shit together to do this thing mentally? And that's honestly the biggest one. And the 3rd is food, is nutrition. And you can get away with a marathon with no food. That's fine. You can get away with 3, 4, 5 hours with no food. Once you hit that mark of somewhere in the 4 or 5 hour range, that is a debilitating factor. And nutrition becomes a huge part of the game to keep your body moving. So I'm not very good at that part, as it turns out. And yes, it's goo, it's bananas, it's all sorts of stuff. And ultimately it just becomes calories. It just literally becomes, what calories can I get in my body, and you will burn it. I
mean, you weren't stopping and, having lunch.
No. No, I was not. I didn't have time, so what's crazy is the event was 36 hours. I went and was trying to do it 34 laps in that 36 hours. Now, 2 hours to spare sounds like a lot of time, but when you break that down, it's 4 minutes per lap that I had to spare. On top of the hour per lap. 4 minutes per lap doesn't really account for lunch or poop, for example.
Yeah. Good one.
So it was an ordeal.
But you got it done.
I did get it done. And there's probably a lesson for another day in that, but ultimately I did get it done.
Well, I mean, what I'm trying to figure out here is, Brad, should I be looking at this excursion as like you have successfully built a business that can operate and thrive without you? Or should I be looking at this as like, this is the level of commitment and dedication that you put into operating Easy Pay Direct? That's a bit of a tee up, but I can't figure out which one it is. How should I be translating this? Like, I obviously learned a lot about you. But pull it around to Easy Pay Direct. How should I categorize it?
I love that. That's a really good question. I think both are probably true.
Yeah.
Right. So I routinely do stupid shit in my spare time, and the business grows without me, which is lovely. But it can always be better. And I think that the real lesson in most of those things is not about me, but it's about, you or anybody listening, of what else are you doing in your life, and where's the parallel inside your own business?
Have you ever posted a job advertisement in Australia?
No, but Australian people have seen some job postings of mine in the States, and they're a big fan. They're big fans out there.
You received some pushback around a job posting that you did.
Isn't that weird? Yeah.
Would you like to speak to that, please? For an executive assistant, personal assistant.
Yeah, sure. So I woke up one morning and checked my phone immediately, as I do. And there was a Google alert that said worst job posting ever. And I clicked it, and it was an article about my job post for my executive assistant. And to date, if you Google Brad Weimert, Australia, you'll get dozens of hits on this thing. The morning, and I was so busy at the time, or felt so busy, that I was like, I don't have time for this shit.
Yeah.
And put it aside. The next morning I woke up and I had like 76 Google alerts on this.
Okay.
I'm like, shit. And that day I got 5 messages from the only 5 people I know in Australia and New Zealand. And all of them hit me up and they were like, dude, what the fuck? Your face is on the front cover of every newspaper in Australia and New Zealand. And I was like, man. So what happened was
I'm big in Japan. So that's good. That Australia and New Zealand. That's sweet. Keep going.
I love it. Well, what happened was somebody in Australia took my job posting and just ripped all the content and posted it in Australia for a part-time assistant at half the salary. And the Australian community did not like it. Both because it's an aggressive job posting with a lot of asks, and that salary was half. And also because Australians are socialists. So they were upset by the capitalistic nature of my job post.
And I mean, in their defense, it was slightly parallel or analogous to like an Ernest Shackleton ad to cross Antarctica.
100%. And guess what? If you don't want the job, don't fucking apply.
Yeah, you might die. It'll be cold, poor pay.
But yeah, you know what's so funny about it is that while it was all happening, I had 4 different friends literally say something to the effect of, can I use your job posting? Right. I like it.
Awesome. Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And I was like, are you not aware of what's going on right now? And they were like, no. And I was like, bro, you got to Google me right now. Like Google me right now.
Yeah, I'm big in Australia. That's great. Brad, what do you believe to be true that very few people would agree with you on?
I feel like that's a tough one, because inevitably there are enough people in the world that somebody else is going to believe the same thing as me. And I think there are a lot of ways that you could say this, but I'm going to say it in the most inflammatory, aggravating way I can to illustrate your point.
Great.
And that is that I think that fat people run bad businesses. And now let me say it in a non-irritating way. Let me say it in a non-irritating way, because I don't actually believe that. Yeah. I believe that how you do one thing is how you do everything. And I believe that there is while that's not literally true, I think that if you are out of shape physically, it's going to have ramifications in other areas of your life. And you can identify where those things are relatively easily. And the patterns that you run that allow you to be grossly out of shape are also going to show up in the operating system that you run your business through.
I'm neither going to agree nor disagree, because if I agree, then I obviously am
latch on to the first statement.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, which was totally irritating, right?
That's great.
Well, it also obviously isn't. I don't believe that there are many absolutes in life, and for nearly all examples, you can find the exception. You get the Warren Buffett that has been eating McDonald's and drinking Coke every day of his life.
Yeah,
and he's old and clearly does very well.
Exactly.
But I do believe that those things show up. And so if you want to actually optimize your life, it's very clear to me when people are way outside of the line somewhere, that's going to show up somewhere else.
What is your mission in life or your purpose?
Growth.
Okay.
That's it. I don't know what, I have some sort of targets for 10 years from now, 20 years from now, my deathbed, et cetera. But I think really, I don't know what 3 years from now is going to look like, or 5. What I know is that I need to be progressing and growing and getting better on a routine basis in a systemic way.
Have you ever acquired a business?
No. You want to help me?
Sure. No problem.
Okay.
Have you ever started a bank?
In the process of.
Okay. You're going to start a bank.
Yeah. I'm actually well down the path with a group of other people. Okay. And it's like, yeah, I mean, look, there are kind of similar to Easy Pay Direct, the credit card processing space, the merchant account world. Anytime you put risk into the picture at scale, the most logical thing to do is chop the ends off. Meaning, why would we deal with the highest risk people when the pool is so large? Let's just create a mediocre system that serves the masses.
Yeah.
But what that does is it isolates big groups, and you lose good business just because you didn't build a good enough system to cater to those businesses. So in banking, in merchant accounts, and in banking, whether it's merchant accounts, whether it's lending, whether it's credit lines, whether it's mortgages, which those are all kind of intersecting, the banking world does not cater to entrepreneurs the way that they need to. And I think that the entrepreneurial wave came so fast, and the banking industry is so big and rich and slow moving that nobody got ahead of it and created the risk assessment for entrepreneurs. And like case in point, any entrepreneur listening that's like on the line and they're trying to get a mortgage, for example, you've got this whole quandary of, well, I don't show income because I'm not stupid. Right. and then bankers are like, well, you don't make any money. And you're like, well, you're stupid. Like, how do you not understand how this works?
Yeah. Exactly.
So the purpose of the bank is to cater to today's entrepreneurs. And we'll be, we're like signing final papers and going through the FDIC process, et cetera, right now.
That's incredible. Is Unplugged something that's still going?
Unplugged is sort of in limbo. So Unplugged is a brand that I have that takes entrepreneurs on adventure trips. And I love crafting experiences. I love crafting unique spaces and unique trips because it creates an environment where people connect faster. But it's so much energy to do them that I've taken in the more recent years to just building my business and going on other people's trips.
I mean, dude, it's one of these things where when I first met you, I don't know if you remember, it was Mastermind Talks. I don't know, a few years back, pre-COVID, but there was an Unplugged event coming up, and it's one of these things where, as a younger entrepreneur, I was part of the Entrepreneurs Organization, and it's all about like creating cohorts of entrepreneurs and then going on these like kind of, top 5%, they call them experiences, right? So that you can bond over these things, or top 1%, I'm sure they call it. but I think that they have a different 5% rule but anyway, so it felt to me like that's what you were kind of going after. But you were sort of like 10xing. I'll grant Cardone this statement. You were 10xing that kind of experience. And something that I have learned about you is the weight that you put on just building rich relationships. And let me say it like this, Quite Light sponsors a number of you mentioned War Room earlier. We were a longtime sponsor of War Room. We sponsor a lot of these masterminds where it's like, it costs 10 grand just to show up at the event.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And, I'm in mastermind talks, War Room. There's another one I'm forgetting. I've seen you at like every single one, like in every year and every quarter and every whatever. So, I mean, it's really clear that you invest heavily in building relationships. And it's just something that I know about you that I thought Unplugged kind of underscored. What is the drive in that? Is it to get customers for Easy Pay Direct? Is it to evolve Brad, or passion for learning? I mean, what's the thing?
It's an effort to align multiple things in my life. So I think that alignment is what I want to be the deliberate through line of all of my activities. So I want to be able to socialize, have adventure, have fun, but I want to be able to do it with people that I could potentially do business with.
Yeah.
Right. That's how I rationalize going out and having crazy adventures. But part of that is that it also became really clear to me that relationships thrive and accelerate through unique experiences and through emotional engagement. And so the more unique the experience, the faster you're going to connect with somebody or repel from them. But it's why I like, the Fiji thing was the one you were talking about. The first Unplugged thing was taking a group of 20 people to Fiji, and super unique, right? That thing stands out in people's minds, and the people that were on the trip will know the other people on the trip forever as a result.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
And then the emotional engagement part is part of what draws me to these athletic endeavors, right? Is when I'm going up a mountain for fucking 20 hours, somebody that I'm with that's doing it with me, you are raw emotionally and you respond in ways that you probably shouldn't. And you have conflict, and you either work through it, and that's usually what happens, or you push away and you realize this is not a human that I want to spend time with. But I love the acceleration of that process and being deliberate about creating environments where I can do it. And some of these masterminds, they all make an effort to do it in different levels. Certainly not, I think, the level that I'm talking about, but it still ends up being a unique experience for a lot of the people that are there, which creates those relationships. It's just it's a leg up to create those relationships.
Yeah. Where are you investing financially right now?
Well, certainly Easy Pay Direct. And that's a real answer, because you do have those choices to make, right? Do you pull a bunch of money off the table and invest somewhere else, or do you feed it back into the business for growth? I spend a lot of time with real estate. Certainly the bank that I'm starting is another one, but real estate is my big lever. And there are a couple of reasons for that. The biggest one, though, is cost segregation. So I'm buying some commercial property every year because it is the largest opportunity to reduce your tax liability.
Commercial property. Okay.
Yep, commercial property.
Do you do multifamily at all?
I am almost entirely single family, and then also commercial. And the commercial is office building and retail.
Okay. And you're bullish on corporate real estate right now. I mean, you must think it's cheap right now.
Yeah. Look, over the last 5 years, it's been different. We're at the end of 2022. We're going into recession. Like rates got out of control. It'll be an interesting next couple of years. We had the whole COVID thing, which is like, do companies rent office space anymore? Right. There are all these different elements. But businesses, there are some businesses that have to be physical no matter what.
Yeah.
And I also think that we'll have cycles no matter what. But if you look at just the tax benefit to cost segregations in commercial real estate, that alone offsets a wild amount of your return. It's like, you look at the whatever return you're getting. If I got the same return on a business versus commercial, but I didn't get the tax benefit, it's not even close to the same.
Thank you. Brad, I've had so much fun hanging out with you. Thanks so much. Where can people find you? Or if they want if they want to find you, if they want to get a hold of you, like all these things.
Finding me and getting a hold of me are two entirely different things. But Beyond a Million is certainly good if you have a business and you want really tactical and strategic advice from people that are fucking killing it. Sales, marketing, operations, technology, and taxation. And then the rest of my life exists on Instagram. So you can find Brad Weimert on Instagram and follow my shenanigans there.
Why? Like I saw you had about 20,000 followers on Insta. Why'd you land on Insta versus a different channel?
It's a good question, man. I think it's sort of a fun, digestible platform. So people go there to consume video. And I think that the video content is what people are going to be doing moving forward. We'll be really heavy in YouTube as well. Now we haven't kind of gone down that path, but that's certainly on the roadmap. But I think that's it.
No, love it. Thanks. Brad, anything else that you want to say before we shut it down here?
No, I don't have any parting words of wisdom for you. I'm sorry.
Just mic drop.
Yep.
Brad, thanks so much for hanging out with me. It was awesome.
Appreciate it, man. Always good to see you.